What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NYG Blue Zone. It's your boy Atticus. And we got more news about this vacant offensive coordinator position. We've got some NFL honors coming up. We talked a little bit about the Hall of Fame. I'm not even going to touch that one again. But it looked like, we were all expecting for any day Ted Monkin to be announced as the Giants' new offensive coordinator. That did not happen. And I think that John Harbaugh and a lot of Giants fans really felt like it was a done deal. We don't need to compile a list and look at other options because he's going to be our guy. And then Monken was offered the head coaching position of the Cleveland Browns, and he took it. And good for them. He's a very good offensive coordinator. Can see how he came into the Baltimore Ravens organization with a rookie quarterback in Lamar Jackson, and he had him playing at such a high level that even though the Ravens had a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Joe Flacco, who just won a Super Bowl, by the way, on their roster, he was able to improve his play so much that Lamar Jackson was elevated to the starting quarterback position, and the Baltimore Ravens offense was just on fire for several years. They had deep playoff runs. They were able to have winning seasons on a consistent basis, put up a bunch of points. They just had a real good offense, a very prolific offense. Now, there were some seasons where Lamar Jackson was injured or they didn't have a good enough running game, but by and large, you cannot say that the Baltimore Ravens offense did not flourish under Monken. But now he's the head coach in Cleveland. And what's really interesting is when he was offered the position and took it, Jim Schwartz said, "I'm out of here." Now, I don't know all the details surrounding why Jim Schwartz decided that he no longer wanted to remain in Cleveland. Perhaps he wanted to be offered the head coaching job. I'm sure he interviewed for it. But I really think that Jim Schwartz is one of those dudes who's a better coordinator than he is a head coach, just like I think the same thing of Cliff Kingsbury, just like I think the same way of so many other people. Brian Daboll's another one. Um, but I don't know the details surrounding why Schwartz decided that, I'm out of here, but he did. And it begs the question, if Schwartz were available before the Giants settled on, I shouldn't say settled on, before the Giants hired Denard Wilson, who, by the way, they looked at Denard Wilson a few years ago and he decided to go elsewhere. But would Jim Schwartz have gotten an interview? And if he did, would he be the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants? I don't know. But it begs the question. I say you have to at least talk to the guy. When you look at the way defenses have played under Jim Schwartz, you have to consider him. I mean, look at what he did with the Philadelphia Eagles defense a couple of years ago. Unbelievable. Look at what he's done with the Cleveland Browns defense over the past number of years. He's just a really good defensive coordinator. And I, for one, would not have been mad if he got the interview and subsequently was hired. I'm not disappointed with Denard Wilson. I think he's going to do just fine. But it definitely makes you wonder. But with the offensive coordinator position now open again, because we thought it was a done deal, who are the Giants going to look at? And there's a long list of candidates that they can look to. And I'm not talking about people that would make lateral moves, because I think those that are still coaching are probably going to stay where they are unless they are offered a head coaching position. So who does that leave us? I'm going to talk about the four names who I like the most, and not necessarily in any specific order, but I have my two top options and my two secondary options. So I'm going to start with my most experienced choice would be Cliff Kingsbury. But I'm going to talk about Tim Kelly because I like him too, what he did with the New York Giants. I'm going to talk about Charlie Weiss Jr., and I'm going to talk about Davis Webb. Those are the four guys who I think the Giants need to strongly consider. And later on, we're going to talk about the Offensive Rookie of the Year honors that Jackson Dart, he's a finalist for. And then Abdul Carter is a finalist for the defensive rookie of the year. So I think that that's really cool that our 2 first-round draft picks are finalists for the rookie of the year in their respective positions. So I think that's pretty cool. Well, let me start with Cliff Kingsbury and why he's probably my top choice of offensive coordinator. And he makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, by the way, he was a head coach at one point, and his best season as a head coach, he led the Arizona Cardinals to an 11-6 record. So he's got experience in running a team, but that's not the reason I really like him. I like what he did with Washington. When he was the coordinator there, and for the life of me, I don't understand why the philosophical differences couldn't have been worked out. But, Dan Quinn felt like he wanted to go in a different direction. Like they had these irreconcilable differences that forced him to move on from a coordinator who just 1 year ago brought your team to the NFC Championship game. I don't understand. But anyway, I digress. 2024, we were fifth in the NFL in points per game. And we watched it in amazement. I'm not just talking about as a Giants fan. NFL fans in general would watch the Washington Commanders in this Jaden Daniels led offense just run up and down the field on teams. I remember when they were playing the Detroit Lions last year, and when they made it to the NFC Championship game, it was unbelievable. These guys were just putting up points, and then it was like you thought they would lose, and somehow that offense would find a way to put up 14 points in a hurry and win the game. Unbelievable. That Hail Mary pass by Jaden Daniels against the Chicago Bears, who was walking around thinking that they won the game. Jaden Daniels throws a Hail Mary and they beat them. It was epic. It was epic. Fifth in the NFL in points per game. They were seventh in the NFL in total offense. They had a top tier running game. They still have a top tier running game. 2025, the offense slipped up a little bit. There was a lot of injuries they were dealing with. They lost Zach Ertz. They lost Jaden Daniels for damn near half of the season. So they slipped down to 22nd in scoring and 22nd in total yards. I mean, they had some regression, but there's reasons for that. That offensive line underperformed for them. And they had a backup quarterback. Mariota was okay for a hot minute, but that was a hot minute that's gone. So how do you put the weight of the collapse of that team for 2025 on the shoulders of Kingsbury when what did he have to work with? And I ain't making excuses for the dude. I think he needs to figure it out. You the OC, you got to figure it out with what you got. Bottom line is they finished with a better record than the New York Giants did. And the New York Giants, I think, had more skilled players and a better team than the Washington Commanders. So I kind of like Cliff Kingsbury. The big hiccup with him and Dan Quinn was the philosophical difference on Cliff Kingsbury running more of a college style offense versus Dan Quinn's desire to have a more traditional offense, a lot of play action passes, a lot more of a conventional, traditional approach to how their offense is run. And they just felt like Cliff Kingsbury wasn't the guy to bring them there. He thought that Dan Quinn thought that Cliff Kingsbury's offense wasn't good for the long-term future of Jaden Daniels. There may be some truth to that. I mean, the guy did get injured. And I think it was more of a freak accident than anything when he bent that elbow back, and it was gruesome to look at. But I also think they brought him back too soon. I still don't think that is enough to part ways with a guy who brought you guys to the NFC Championship a year ago and did it in just a remarkable fashion with a rookie quarterback, and to be in the top 10 of every statistical category that mattered. So, but, I think that when you look at Kingsbury, his offense has a real proven ceiling at an NFL level. I think that if you paired him with a strong, stabilizing head coach, we could see some really good things from the Giants offense, particularly given the fact that a lot of our core pieces are already in place. I think that if you give Kingsbury a chance to design the offense, help to develop the quarterback, and modernize our passing game within Harbaugh's structure, we would be okay. Still don't get why Dan Quinn didn't think he could figure that out with him. It's really a head scratching situation, but I don't care. The other person that I think might be a good fit, I wouldn't say he's necessarily my second option, but he's probably my 2B, is Tim Kelly. Tim Kelly's one of the few guys that John Harbaugh decided to retain on his coaching staff. And as we all know, he was the tight ends coach, and I don't think he did a bad job. I think there's some work still that needs to be done with the tight ends on technique and how they catch the ball with their body instead of with their hands. But we saw moments where these guys really shined, and then we saw moments where they just made us want to pull out whatever hair we have left. But he was promoted to the interim offensive coordinator position when Brian Daboll was let go. And I think he did a pretty good job with the offense. There were a couple of games that were just like real heartbreaking losses with Green Bay and then the Detroit Lions, where I think the Giants offensively did enough to win those games, but the defense kind of let us down. And that's a story for another podcast. But I think that offensively, when you look at the work that Tim Kelly did, and granted he was not the play caller, but he was the offensive coordinator. They still put up over 22 points per game. They were 17th in the NFL in scoring, and while that is not barn burning, that's decent for a guy in his first stint in as an offensive coordinator with a team. So it showed that we could still function as an NFL team, that we weren't completely broken. And some of the games that we were able to compete in with him as the OC was pretty damn good. I think that when they went out to New England and played the Patriots, there was some regression there. Jackson Dart was just returning from a concussion. And I don't know that the game plan in that game or the Minnesota game were really sound. And I think a part of that had to do with Kafka trying to put him in bubble wrap and not letting the kid play. But we saw when they took the reins off Jackson Dart, he was able to really do his thing. Now, I don't know if that was a function that came out of the Tim Kelly mind. I would like to think it came out of the Mike Kafka mind, because he was the one who was ultimately calling the plays. And I can remember watching in the Minnesota game, there were like 8 running plays in a row where Jackson Dart wasn't even given the opportunity to pass the ball. And I felt like this is really not cool. And I know that you're trying to protect the kid, but you're not giving him good reps while he's on a field. And how are you going to learn to improve in areas if you're not given those opportunities? And I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. But, you got to keep in mind with Kelly that it was a mid-season coaching transition. There were limitations based on what he was able to do because, like I said, Kafka was still the one calling the plays. And the team was still trying to figure out their identity, right? But he did show a baseline of competence. I think that it will allow for some stability within the coaching staff and the development of Jackson Dart. And there must have been something that John Harbaugh saw in him because he kept him. And that matters. And we know John Harbaugh, he's always valued coaches who teach. And with what Tim Kelly's been able to do with that tight ends room and then subsequently moving into the offensive coordinator position, there's something there that Harbaugh saw. He was able to adjust mid-season, going from a positions coach to a coordinator position. That's a pretty big deal, and it's not something that's easy to do. And he did it, and he did it well. I didn't think the transition was too big for him. I thought that he handled the men well. I thought that he handled the responsibilities well. And the Giants did not fall off a cliff. They continued to show improvement under him. And I think that matters also. So he already knows the building. He already knows the roster. And if Harbaugh wants continuity while he installs his culture on the team, I think that this is a pretty good option to have. All right, so the other two guys I want to talk about, and One of them is a familiar name in Davis Webb, and then we have Charlie Weiss Jr., right? But I'm gonna start off with let me start off with Charlie Weiss. He represents process over flash, right? He's not one of those guys that's gonna go out there and give you all of these trick plays and things that's going to require a lot of different moving parts before you see that it's working out. He's going to give you some things in incremental pieces that allows you to grow into what he wants the offense to look like. Like, he's known for his quarterback development, his heavy use of play action concepts, and his willingness to adapt scheme to the personnel, which I think is critically important because how many times do we see a coach trying to force a player to play into or play like what they want to see as opposed to using their skill sets and expanding on them and coaching them into being better players while operating from the framework and the margins that they're comfortable doing. And it doesn't work. But when you allow a player to be themselves, but coach them into being or fine tuning technique, it usually works out and they're able to really flow. And I think that he's a guy who'd be able to do that with Jackson Dart. Now, the only problem is he doesn't have any NFL offensive coordinator experience, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And he's working in the Sean McVay world. So system, a lot of people like that. And you know that if Sean McVay has touched it, usually it works out pretty well. But he's somebody who would be kind of a developmental hire. And I don't know that that's what Harbaugh is looking for. I really think what he wanted was somebody that's kitchen tested and mother approved. And that's why Kingsbury is probably my first choice because he knows the job, right? But I do like Charlie Weiss because he's one of those guys who has seen and worked within a good system, and it may not be as big of a jump for him as it might be for somebody else. So I think that, he focuses on clarity. He's got strong fundamentals. And one of his focuses will be on executing the plays properly. And we've seen that along his journey through the coaching ranks. So I think that he might be a good option. So, and I think that that will fit very cleanly with what John Harbaugh has valued in coaches in the past. Like, we can just take a short trip down memory lane and see that these are some of the characteristics that he has consistently looked for. And then I want to talk about Davis Webb, familiar name to the New York Giants. He was the backup quarterback while he was in New York. Repeatedly, I would hear how this guy has an incredible football mind. It is clear that he's going to be a coach one day. And you can tell that there's some guys that it's just oozing out of everything that they say and do. So he's a name that is probably going to, I shouldn't say probably, he's going to be a coach one day, a head coach. Right now, I think he's a passing game coordinator for the Denver Broncos. And we see what he's done with Bo Nix out there. Bo Nix was a broken ankle away from playing in an AFC championship game. And had he been there, some say that the Broncos would have won that game. Probably would have. He's certainly a better athlete than Stidham, and he's got better chemistry with the players, and he got them all the way there, and unfortunately had to go undergo surgery and couldn't play. But good quarterback, and Davis Webb had a lot to do with that. So he's a former NFL quarterback, former Giant. He's a respected teacher, respected coach. And his appeal is pretty simple. Like, he speaks quarterback language. And when you've got Jackson Dart, who you are trying to develop into being what we already know is going to be our franchise quarterback, but trying to develop him into improving and showing steady improvement over the course of his young career, you want somebody who can give them that and do it through the eyes of a quarterback. And I don't know if any of you guys have been watching or did watch Hard Knocks NFC East. One of the things that Jackson Dart talked about that he really liked about Mike Kafka was the fact that he was getting a lot of his direction and coaching from a former quarterback. He saw the game through the lens that Jackson Dart sees it, and that mattered to him when he was teaching him different skills and concepts and things that he was looking for from him. So that's something that we already know resonates well with Jackson Dart. So why not bring somebody in who can see it through a similar lens? So I thought that that was pretty cool too. And then, Davis Webb, he don't have his big ego and all of the other shit that you see with some of these guys who come in and think that they're hotty toddy, whatever the case may be. Like he emphasizes rhythm, sound decision making, and he wants to see you grow. And I think if you have an individual who has those key core characteristics, that's a good place to start. Even though he's inexperienced as an offensive coordinator, he's on track and he's going to be one, whether it be with the New York Giants or another team. He's likely going to be one. I know that the Giants did submit a request to interview him, and I believe it was granted. So he's another solid name that I'd like to see one of those four guys see as the offensive coordinator. Now there are other solid options that are out there. And like I said, I don't think you're going to see lateral moves like Mike McDaniels. He's somebody who I really liked. Obviously, we all thought that Ted Monkin would be a good option. Sean McDermott was just let go, but he's more of a defensive minded coach. Some people were thinking that Sean McVay might leave, but if he left, he's going to want to be a head coach somewhere. But they're going to be looking for a quarterback too, because it's been reported that Matthew Stafford is retiring. He's hanging it up. And what a career that guy has had, like from going from the Detroit Lions, where he was just a shining bright spot out there, him and Megatron, to going to the Rams and winning the Super Bowl immediately. I mean, both organizations benefited from the trade, but kudos to Stafford and the career that he's had. I was always a Matt Stafford fan as a player. Obviously, I'm a ride or die Giants fan, but so who knows what's going to happen in Los Angeles now that he's retired, and some of the staff on the McVay tree may want to find other opportunities out there. I don't know, but yeah, so I guess if I really think about it in the order that I went through them is probably the order that I'd like to see the new OC for the New York Football Giants. Cliff Kingsbury is my number one choice. I do like what Tim Kelly has done as the interim OC. I actually like what Mike Kafka's done as the interim OC, as the offensive coordinator with the Giants, not as the head coach. But, play calling, I didn't think he was bad except for in the Minnesota Vikings game. Charlie Weiss Jr. and then Davis Webb, probably in that order. So I do want to also talk about, we've got two rookies who are finalists for Offensive Rookie of the Year and one for Defensive Rookie of the Year, Jackson Dart. Yo, I really like our quarterback, man. Like, I really think this kid, he's got the temperament, the mindset. He handles the press well. I love that dog in him. He gets out there and he gets after it. He's going to give it everything on the field, probably to an extent that puts himself at physical risk. And I think he's done a better job at that. Particularly in the last few games of the season, we saw him making business decisions and not taking unnecessary hits, sliding, throwing the ball away. I really like Jackson Dart as our quarterback, and so does the league apparently, because he is one of the finalists for the Offensive Rookie of the Year. In my opinion, he is the Offensive Rookie of the Year. There are other guys who are being considered. I think Tyler Sugar is being considered, but he hasn't had the same level of production. Even though he had more wins, the production is not competitive with Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, 2,272 passing yards, he had 15 passing touchdowns. He had 9 rushing touchdowns. He finished the year with a 91.7 quarterback rating, and he also rushed for almost 500 yards. I mean, he's got a rare dual threat rookie stat line. And just for some additional context, the kid's been named the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Month in October. He was the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year finalist. And he was also the nominee for the Pepsi Zero Sugar NFL Rookie of the Year as well. Dart didn't just survive his rookie season, he produced efficiently. He protected the football. And like I said, he added almost 500 yards and 9 touchdowns on the ground. That's elite quarterback play from a rookie position. And I don't even remember all of the NFL records that he broke as a rookie and Giants records that he broke as a rookie. The kid knows how to ball. All he does, like John Harbaugh said, all the kid does is talk ball. It's all he wants to do. He said, and I like to talk ball too. So we're going to have a lot of conversations. I'm loving what he put on the field this year. I think that he deserves the nod. Then you got the defensive rookie of the year, Abdul Carter. He certainly started the year off a little bit slower than we wanted. There was some, I guess we would call them behavioral issues, but those are things that they existed before he came into the league. And I think there was just some maturing that he had to go through. But even with that, he put a lot of effort on the field. It didn't necessarily result in sacks every game like we had hoped, but the guy was a force. And I can't even tell you, if he wasn't held as many times as he was, how many sacks he might have had. And there were also a couple of situations where the Giants were penalized on plays where he had already gotten a sack. I think he had 2 sacks that were wiped away as a result of Giants penalties. But he finished the year, his rookie season, with 43 tackles, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 66 quarterback pressures, which was 8th most in the entire NFL and most of all rookies. And he had 44 quick pressures, and those are pressures that happen in under 2.5 seconds, which was most in the NFL. And like I said, a couple of his sacks were taken off the board as a result of penalties. Sacks are nice, but pressure is disruption. Pressure turns into picks. Pressure turns into fumbles. Pressure turns into other players getting to him. Brian Burns, for example, who benefited greatly off of some of those Abdul Carter pressures and got sacks. This is not in any way to take away anything that Brian Burns did, but it certainly helped him to get some of the sacks that he got. He's a disruptor, and that's what you need. And he gave us that, even though he had such a slow start to his rookie campaign, he did really well. So I think that's why he is a finalist for the AP Defensive Rookie of the Year. And he may not get it because there are a couple of guys on the Atlanta Falcons that just balled hard this year. A couple of other players in the league too. But just to be considered, to be in the conversation is noteworthy. So good luck to both of those guys. So basically, we need a new offensive coordinator. I told you guys who I like. I think Kingsbury has a lot of upside because of his experience. Look at what he's done. And I'm not talking about way back. I'm talking about not long ago in the rearview mirror. He had his team humming in the NFC Championship game. And had it not been for some injuries and poor play from the offensive line, we might have seen some improvement this year too. And by the way, the offensive line coach in Washington was what was his name? Bobby something. But he was our offensive line coach 2 years ago, and we ran him out of there because we just did not get the production that we were looking for in year 2 of him being in Washington, and it's the same issue. So we would need a new offensive line coach should Kingsbury come. We're going to need a new one anyway, but usually offensive coordinators like to bring their offensive line coaches with them. So we would see how that all plays out. But I like Kingsbury because of his experience. I do like Tim Kelly because I like the continuity that he brings, the stability that he provides from being a familiar voice for Jackson Dart. But that's not necessarily important for me because we saw how Dart was able to pivot when Brian Daboll was let go, and now it was only Kafka he was listening to. And Dart and Daboll were attached at the hip for a large part of the season. So, and he was able to pivot and pivot well when that happened. So I don't think that would be a big deal for him Charlie Weiss is a good name also, and for developmental reasons, and because he's from the McVay tree, I think that Charlie Weiss would be somebody who would give a new perspective, and he's something that would assimilate nicely into John Harbaugh's vision. But again, he's inexperienced as an offensive coordinator, so that's what gives me a little bit of reason to pause. And then Davis Webb, I really like Davis Webb, probably a little bit more than Charlie Weiss. I know I flip-flop on that a little bit, but I think I like him a little more than Charlie Weiss because there's so much upside with Davis Webb, and not just because of how well he is doing as a passing coordinator with the Denver Broncos, but he's already on a fast track to become one of the next great minds as an offensive coordinator in this league. And he's a former quarterback, which I think will also add to the value that he brings to Jackson Dart and his development. What better way than to teach a person how to swim when you've been swimming your whole life? So I think that would be pretty good too. He's just got one of those guys who's got league-wide recognition for being one of those guys who is definitely slated to be one of the big names in coaching in the years to come. So, the Giants aren't guessing anymore. Unfortunately, the guy that they wanted, he moved on and went to do bigger and better things as a head coach, but there's still some good options out there. I do think the Giants need to make a decision relatively quickly and make a decision on who they want and get your guy, because other teams are looking to fill these positions as well. So that's my show for today. I just wanted to share that with you guys. These are my thoughts on offensive coordinator. Good luck to Jackson Dart and Abdul Carter on your NFL honors, and I hope that you both get it. At a minimum, I think Jackson Dart well deserves to be the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, and there's a strong case for Abdul Carter being the Defensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL for this season. So let me know what you guys think about what I had to share today. I really appreciate it. And don't forget, if you like the content, you like what we have to offer on our channel, please like, subscribe, so that anytime we drop some new content, you're one of the first ones to be notified. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.
Yeah, a lot of girls probably crying from my old high school. Look, they see me everywhere they go. I probably would too. Look, crossed over to the Jordan men like I'm Michael. Yeah, eating blessings so much I might need lipo. Yeah, tailored for the doves like I'm walking in chucks. Yeah, it's just in this plan, man, I see all y'all shook. Look, knew that I was great ever since I was a rook. Man, all y'all singles making me look good. Okay, praise to the Most High, yeah, that's Jesus. Look, but when it come to this rap thing, I can't lose. Yeah, back-to-back number ones, that's a thing greats do. Yeah, tell them boys that ain't nothing I can't do. It's my year. It's my year.